I dropped to the floor, gasping, my chest tight as my lungs completely shut down mid-asthma attack. I clawed at the hardwood, desperate for air. My little sister stood right in front of me, holding my inhaler just out of reach, grinning like she was watching her favorite show. "Gasp, loser," she whispered, amused. Behind her, my parents just stood there. They didn't flinch. Didn't move. That's the moment I realized. Your own family can watch you suffocate and call it being dramatic. It would be 19 years before I saw that moment again, this time playing on a courtroom screen. And right before the footage cut off, something happened that none of us saw coming. My name is Abigail Carter. For most of my life, I thought staying quiet was the only way to survive my family. I grew up in a picture-perfect house in Seattle. Trimmed hedges, sparkling windows, a front porch my mom decorated for every season. But inside, the air felt heavy, like you had to work for every single breath. My mom, Eleanor, ran the household like a CEO. Everything had to be neat, polished, controlled, no mistakes allowed. My dad, Thomas, stayed in the background, always calm, always neutral. His idea of keeping the peace was never taking sides. And then there was Vivian, my younger sister, the favorite, the one who always needed a little extra attention. They never said what I needed. The older I got, the quieter I became. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because I learned fast. My voice only stirred things up. At dinner, Vivian would chatter about school or weekend plans, and my parents would light up. But the second I opened my mouth, the whole energy shifted. My mom would tense up. My dad would glance at the clock, and the conversation would roll right past me like I wasn't even there. By the time I was 16, I had disappearing down to an art. The only person who ever really saw me was my grandmother, Margaret. She always smelled like lavender and old books, and she listened like the world outside didn't exist. With her, I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't difficult. I was just me. On weekends, I'd escape to her house. We'd water plants or bake whatever recipe she was trying to master that month. Sometimes she'd put her hand on mine and say, "You're stronger than they know." Those words carried me through more birthdays than I'd like to admit, birthdays my own family forgot. I remember turning 16, sitting at dinner, waiting for someone to say something. Anything. They didn't. Vivian had a cheer competition that weekend, so the whole house was covered in glitter and banners. I just sat there quietly, reminding myself it didn't matter. Grandma would remember. And she always did. When I got into college, I left the thick acceptance envelope on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would see it. The next morning, it was gone. No one said a word. My mom never asked about it. My dad never mentioned it. I ended up calling the admissions office myself to make sure I'd actually been accepted. Back then, I told myself it was all small stuff. Families forget. People get busy. But there's danger in brushing off harm. Eventually, you stop realizing you're being erased. And 19 years later, when the past came roaring back, I learned someone else had been watching the whole time. It started on a quiet Tuesday evening. One of those peaceful nights that tricks you into thinking the past can't reach you anymore. I came home from work, kicked off my heels, made some tea, and started sorting through the mail. Bills, a flyer, a charity letter. Then one envelope made me freeze mid-sip. A subpoena. I was ordered to appear in a Seattle courtroom for a defamation case. Vivian Carter Monroe versus Rebecca Torres. I stared at the name. My sister's married name. I hadn't spoken to her or my parents in 3 years. Portland had become my reset button. A place where no one called me dramatic or too emotional. But now the law was dragging me right back into the world I worked so hard to leave behind. I set the subpoena down and forced myself to breathe. I had no idea who Rebecca Torres was, or what kind of mess Vivian had landed herself in this time. But deep in my chest, something old and bruised began to stir. A kind of ache I hadn't felt in years. That night, I broke a rule I'd held onto for far too long. I looked up my sister online. Within seconds, I found Rebecca's blog. The headline talked about the usual workplace toxicity. Being left out of meetings, credit taken, rumors flying. Classic corporate nastiness. But then I got to the final paragraph and everything stopped. It read, Vivian has a pattern that goes back decades. Ask her sister about the asthma incident. Ask why their family spent years making sure no one believed her. My breath caught. I read it again. Then a third time. By then my hands were shaking. No outsider should have known about that day. Me on my knees gasping for air. My inhaler dangled just out of reach while Vivian smiled. And no one, absolutely no one, should have known what happened after. The gaslighting, the rewriting of every memory, the years I spent being told I was overreacting, emotional, imagining things. But someone knew. Someone had seen the pattern. Suddenly, the memories I'd locked away started breaking loose like wreckage rising after a flood. Grandma calling one night, confused and hurt, saying she hadn't heard from me in months, even though I'd left 3 voicemails that week. My college acceptance letter disappearing like it never existed. Birthday cards I mailed coming back unopened. Family members who used to ask about me just stopping. Not coincidence. Not forgetfulness. A pattern. A quiet campaign to erase me. I backed away from my desk, pressing a hand to my ribs. For 19 years I'd convinced myself it was me. Maybe I was too emotional. Maybe I remembered it wrong. Maybe families just forgot sometimes. But that one line in Rebecca's blog lit a match in the dark. I grabbed my phone, ready to call a lawyer. Ready to find a way out of testifying. But I didn't dial. I just stood there. They'd spent almost 2 decades making sure I had no voice. What if, for once, I used it? I shut the legal pad in front of me and opened my laptop. I typed a name I hadn't thought about in years. A girl I once sat beside in high school. A girl who'd once told me I saved her life. Her name was Nora Lawson. Back then, she was the quiet one, always hunched over a beat-up laptop, never making eye contact with the girls who worshipped my sister. She was mocked, pushed out of groups, ignored like she didn't exist. I wasn't popular enough to defend her, but I sat with her when no one else would. Years later, she became a digital forensic specialist in Portland. She spent her days recovering deleted files, tracing digital footprints most people thought were long gone. When I called her, she didn't hesitate. "Bring whatever you've got," she said. "If they erased you, we'll unerase you." That one line steadied me in a way I didn't realize I still needed. 2 days later, I walked into her office. It was small but alive with quiet purpose. Screens glowing, machines humming, processors lined up on metal racks. A space built on truth. A place where the past didn't vanish just because someone wanted it to. I reached into my bag and pulled out the only thing I'd kept from that house. A thin DVD in a paper sleeve. Written across it in Vivian's handwriting. Family Memories 2004-. I'd taken it with me when I left at 18. Never watched it. Just kept it. Even touching it made my fingers tense. Nora slid it into her system. "Let's see what your family didn't mean to save," she murmured. Within minutes, a window opened on her monitor. There it was, the living room from my childhood. The camera wobbled a little, and then Vivian's younger voice filled the speakers, giggling as she zoomed in on herself, reflected in the black TV screen. My stomach tightened. I remembered that camcorder. Vivian recorded everything. Breakfasts, chores, fights she wasn't supposed to overhear. And then the footage shifted. The camera was aimed at the floor. My hand clawing at the carpet. My body collapsing into the frame. My voice rasping for air. Just watching it made my throat tighten. Vivian's voice sliced through the speakers, sharp and giddy. "Look at her. She's so pathetic." In the corner of the shot, my inhaler dangled just out of reach. She stepped closer, deliberately blocking me. And behind it all, my parents sat on the couch. Still. Silent. Unmoved. I swallowed hard, pressing my palms to my knees to stay steady. "That's enough," I whispered. But Nora wasn't looking at the screen anymore. Her expression had changed. "Abigail," she said quietly, "there's more." Turns out the disc didn't just hold video. It also contained an auto backup of old email archives from when Vivian burned the DVD on the family computer. Dozens, no hundreds, of messages between my mother and Vivian. Nora opened one. Dated 2 days after the asthma attack. "Eleanor, delete the video. Don't mention it to Grandma. We need to keep up appearances." Vivian. Already did. I told her Abigail refused to come downstairs because she was being difficult again. "Eleanor, good. Keep it up. We can't let this ruin your relationship with her. Too much at stake." Something inside my chest caved in. Not fear. Not grief. Something colder. Recognition. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't just neglect. It was planned. 19 years of my life. twisted and erased by the people who shared my last name. I sat up straighter, wiped my face, and said quietly, "We're taking this to court." Nora nodded. "And Abigail," she added, "you're not the one who should be afraid anymore." The morning of the hearing felt like stepping into someone else's story. Seattle's courthouse loomed above me. Clean glass and steel, reaching into a sky that couldn't decide whether to pour rain or let the sun through. I tightened my coat, the cold spring air cutting against my skin as I walked through the doors. Each step echoed with the truth I'd spent 19 years trying to bury. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Papers rustling, chairs scraping, lawyers murmuring. Rebecca sat near the defense table, stiff in her blazer but steady. When she looked over and saw me, something in her face softened. Gratitude. Nerves. Relief. She'd been the victim, yes, but she was also the first person in years to speak my truth out loud. Then the doors opened. Vivian walked in like she owned the place. Hair perfect, coat fitted, makeup flawless. She looked like someone who believed her life was bulletproof. Behind her was Eleanor, wearing the calm, polished smile she reserved for charity events and Christmas cards. And trailing behind them was Thomas, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes low, just as passive as always. Vivian spotted me sitting at the defense table and froze. She blinked once, then again, as if trying to process the impossible. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something, and she straightened, slipping her panic behind a mask of poise. Then the judge entered, and everything snapped into stillness. "Court is now in session," she said. "We will begin with the plaintiff's testimony." Vivian took the stand like it was hers by birthright. She spoke in that rehearsed, polished voice about her career, her reputation, and the damage she claimed Rebecca had done. She painted herself as the kind colleague, the generous mentor, the victim of betrayal. And I sat there watching her build a castle of lies, one polished sentence at a time. Then her lawyer said the line that cracked everything open. "Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to show that these allegations stem from her sister's unstable history." The room shifted. Vivian didn't look at me, but I saw her jaw tighten, the slight lift in her shoulders. She planned to use me as her defense, as her excuse. The judge turned toward me. "Miss Carter, the court acknowledges your presence. You are listed as a witness. Please approach." My pulse thundered in my ears as I stood. But Nora had prepared me for this. Truth doesn't need a spotlight, just needs to be seen. Vivian's lawyer didn't waste a second. The moment I was sworn in, he launched in. "Miss Carter, is it true you've been estranged from your family for years?" "Yes," I answered steady. "And would you say your memories may be influenced by emotional distress or unresolved family issues?" "No," I said calmly. "My memories are influenced by what actually happened." He gave a smug little smirk. "Isn't it true your family expressed concern about your mental stability when you were younger?" "They expressed it behind my back," I replied. "Never to my face. And never with any kind of professional evaluation. That wasn't concern. It was strategy." That last word hit like a spark. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Then my lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said, "the defense would like to introduce a set of documents authenticated by a certified digital forensic specialist." The judge gave a single nod. "Proceed." Nora stepped up to the screen at the front of the courtroom. With a few taps on her keyboard, the first email lit up. The timestamp shown in the corner. Eleanor to Vivian. "Delete the video and don't mention it to Grandma. We need to keep up appearances." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Vivian shot forward in her seat. "That's taken out of context." Nora clicked again. "Vivian. Already did. I told her Abigail refused to come downstairs. She believed it." "Eleanor. Good. Keep going. Too much at stake." The judge raised her hand. "Ms. Monroe, you will remain silent while evidence is presented." Vivian slumped back, wide-eyed, breathing shallow. Then came the moment I'd waited nearly 2 decades for. The judge looked around the room and said, "Before we proceed, let's watch a family video." My stomach turned, not with fear but with something sharper. Anticipation. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. There I was, 17 years old, collapsing on the carpet. My hand stretched toward the inhaler. My breath ragged, choked, every gasp echoing through the courtroom like chains dragging across stone. Vivian's voice cut through, high and sharp. "Gasp, loser." A few people in the gallery covered their mouths. On screen, my parents just sat there, still, watching, not moving, not helping. The judge's face hardened. Rebecca's attorney looked stunned. Even Thomas, my father, closed his eyes like he couldn't bear to watch. Guilt radiated off him like heat. But Eleanor never looked away. She stared straight ahead, her expression like ice. Then the camera caught something else. Just a flash in the glass cabinet's reflection. Vivian, holding the inhaler behind her back, smiling. When the video stopped, the silence was absolute. I could hear the buzz of the ceiling lights. Vivian stood up, shaky. This is edited. This isn't." But her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. And then, just like the video's thumbnail had warned, she broke. "You don't understand," she screamed. "You don't understand what it was like. She was always in the way. Mom said. "Miss Monroe," the judge snapped. "Sit down." Her shouting collapsed into sobs. Eleanor reached out, but Vivian pulled away, unraveling right there in front of everyone. And for the first time in my life, I watched their perfect image disintegrate. No more control. No more script. Just the raw, exposed truth. The judge cleared her throat. Based on the email correspondence, the video evidence, and the consistent pattern of behavior described in testimony, this court finds that the plaintiff's claims lack credibility. She paused, her voice steady. Furthermore, the evidence strongly supports a history of long-term psychological mistreatment within the family. Vivian crumpled into her hands. Eleanor sat frozen, fingers clenched tight around her purse. Thomas stared at the floor, shoulders hunched like the weight of everything they'd done had finally landed. The judge looked back toward the room. "This case is dismissed. Costs will be assigned to the plaintiff. The implications of these documents will be referred to the appropriate civil courts for further review." The gavel struck. A sound like a door slamming shut, on a lie that had lasted nearly 2 decades. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest for years. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Vivian stayed slumped in her chair. Mascara smeared, shoulders trembling, breath uneven. Eleanor didn't move. Not a twitch. Like she'd turned to stone. Then Thomas stepped toward me. His voice was barely a whisper. "Abigail," he said. "I'm sorry." I met his eyes, and for once he didn't look away. "You should have been," I said softly. "A long time ago." Then I turned and walked out, leaving their silence behind. Stepping into a future that, for the first time, didn't belong to them. The civil proceedings that followed moved slower than the trial, but the outcome hit even harder. The judge overseeing my grandmother's estate reviewed everything: Margaret's journals, the emails Nora had recovered, and every manipulation my mother and sister had used to paint me as unstable, selfish, or unreliable. What came into focus wasn't a few misunderstandings, it was a calculated pattern. Something I'd felt my whole life but hadn't had the words to name. In the end, the ruling was decisive. The original inheritance had been altered under false pretenses. Vivian was ordered to return nearly $180,000 in assets. Money she'd already used for renovations, a new car, luxury getaways. But for someone who built her identity on being the chosen one, the financial loss was nothing compared to what came next. Her employer opened an internal investigation. Her husband filed for separation. By summer, she was living alone in a cramped apartment across the city. Eleanor didn't lose money. She lost something she clung to more: her image. The social circle she'd cultivated for decades, the church friends, the neighborhood groups, the polished persona of the perfect mother. All of it fell apart. Her name stopped showing up on invites. Conversations died when she entered a room. She became someone people whispered about, not someone they admired. As for Thomas, he reached out again. This time without excuses. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just understanding. And I gave him the only thing I had left to offer: space to start fresh. But not a path back in. And me? I finally breathed. I used part of my settlement to start the Margaret Carter Fund, a small foundation for survivors of family psychological abuse, to help them rebuild. It felt like a way to honor what my grandmother gave me. A quiet kind of proof that I was never invisible. In the months that followed, I learned something simple but life-changing. Family isn't defined by blood. It's the people who see you, believe you, refuse to let you disappear. My past didn't magically vanish, but it didn't control me anymore. I could finally breathe freely, not because my lungs were stronger, but because the truth was. If my story resonates with you, share your experience in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.